about here today, as always, our primary goal through all of this is to see you come closer to Jesus. That's what we want. We want you to be able to build a relationship with God, and that relationship would be a changing factor in your life. So for some of us today, you're going to take your first steps that you've ever taken towards Jesus. And I can't tell you how excited we are for that. And we want to get some materials in your hand. We have an online connection card. If you're on our app, it's there. If you would like to go to www.theelement.cc, .cc, element, theelement.cc. Our online card is there as well, right under the I'm New page. We'll also have it in the description, in the comments. But we really want to see you come to Jesus. We really want to see you grow in your relationship with God. So some of us are going to take first steps, and some of us are going to take next steps. And maybe you're already serving God and you are taking your next steps with God. And that is, you're looking at your life and going, how can I continue to grow closer to the King? And man, that's exciting too. And we can't wait to help you take those next steps. So with that being said, I got some notes down here, and I'm going to start just sharing what I believe is going to change the sort of how we look at life and how we look at taking risk and being safe. So if you got a Bible, you can go to 1 Kings 18. That's where we're going to be. But I want to start off with this question. How many of you can finish this sentence? If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. We say that all the time. You probably have said that sometime this week. I know I have said it sometime this week. And it's a saying, an idiom that we say constantly. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And the thought process behind that is just that. If it's okay, why touch it? Why mess with it? My question to you is this, though. Just because it ain't broke, is there a possibility that it could be better? Just because it's not broke and it doesn't need fixing, could it be better? Are we settling sometimes for the all right when that thing could be a lot better? Could it be all great? And so what we want to talk about is this thought of comfortability. And I don't know about you, but I love being comfortable. Like, I like comfortable shirts. I like comfortable hats. I'm all about comfort, and I would suggest, that you probably are the same way. You're probably a creature of habit, but also a creature of comfort. And so the problem with that is, I think so many times that is the very tool that the enemy uses to bring us into this sleepy lull of mediocrity. And this is my fear in my own life, is that one day I will wake up and I would have not grown in my relationship any deeper than I had 10 years ago. Because quite honestly, it was comfortable and it wasn't broke. But I never dared to see God move in a new way. And so when we're going to talk about Elijah. We're going to pick up where we left off last week. And Elijah has just raised this little boy from the dead, this widow's son. Now, Elijah has experienced God's provision in a miraculous way. I mean, he's been experiencing God's provision for the last 3 years in a miraculous way. First, the whole series is called Rivers, Ravens, and Widows. And so first, God pronounces a famine in the land, a drought. It produces a famine. There's no food. And God provides for Elijah this brook, this river. And he has ravens come to him, and the ravens feed him. And that's amazing. That's amazing. And then when the brook dries up and the ravens stop, he tells Elijah to go to this neighboring town. And he goes to this town and he tells him there's going to be a widow there. And we said that was crazy that a widow would be able to take care of him, because in a famine, the first people to die are widows because they have no one to take care of them. They're usually poor. But what do you know? He walks right into the gates of the city, and there's a widow, the first one he sees, and she's gathering sticks. And long story short, God provides again. And even this widow is experiencing God's provision. This widow is experiencing this surplus of food. God did not let her jar run out of oil or her pot run out of flour. It's like every time she dipped some out to make some more bread or a cake or something to eat, God replenished that. And that's amazing. And then, like we said at the beginning, her son, this widow, her son gets sick and he dies. And Elijah carries this little boy up to his room and stretches him out onto his bed, lays on him 3 times and prays, God, bring this kid back to life. And God does it. And so Elijah is experienced provision after provision after provision. No doubt that the raising of that boy was probably the icing on the cake for Elijah. And you would think at that point, he could kick back a little bit, right? I mean, everything is good right now. He has food. This little boy is not dead anymore. Everything is all right. And wouldn't you know it, just as I think Elijah is settling in, just as he's settling in verse 1 in chapter 18, it says that after many days, the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year. So 3 years. 3 years have passed. Isn't that amazing? 3 years have passed. And said, go show yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain upon the earth. That's crazy. Go show yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain upon the earth. So here is Elijah. He's just sinking in to relax, I'm guessing. And the Lord says, it's time to leave. It's time, Elijah, for you to leave the provision again. And so now he must leave the safety. He left the safety of the brook, the safety of the ravens. Now he's leaving the safety of the widow's home. And he's taking a step towards a king that doesn't like him very much. His wife, I guarantee, hates his guts. And so he's got to go to this king. And I would tell you that this is going to be a great lesson for us to learn today, because I think often we get so tied up in the comfortability of the way things are that we wouldn't fathom leaving something safe to experience God in a new way. We just wouldn't. But Elijah, he is told to go. And so he leaves. Again, the safety and provision that has been set before him. But what he doesn't know is that God is orchestrating more provision for him. I mean, God is orchestrating someone that's going to meet him. But before we get there, there's this guy named Obadiah. Now, Obadiah he's a believer. In verse 3, I think it says that he fears the Lord greatly. And Obadiah is a manager set over at King Ahab's home, which has got to be a little awkward for him. But nevertheless, he's over the household there of King Ahab. And he is serving diligently, but he's also a believer. On the side, Obadiah is hiding prophets. Now, Ahab's wife, Jezebel, is killing prophets. She's killing prophets. And the reason she's killing the prophets, a lot of people think that because, quite frankly, she's upset about this drought. And she's thinking that if I can eradicate God's prophets, then the curse of the drought will be lifted. And so Obadiah hides 100 prophets and separates them into groups of 50s. So 2 groups of 50, and they're in caves. And he's feeding them, and he's bringing them water. So it's pretty amazing. So Obadiah is secretly taking care over 100 prophets. And Ahab has no idea. Jezebel definitely has no idea. So as Elijah is on his way to go see the king, Obadiah and Ahab are on their way to look for water. So you pick up in chapter 18, verse 5 and 6. It says, and Ahab said to Obadiah, go through the land to all the springs of water and to all the valleys, and perhaps we may find grass and save the horses and mules alive and not lose some of the animals. Again, there's a drought, there's a famine. And Ahab says, hey, let's split the land up. You go one direction, I'm going to go in another direction. And let's report back here and let's see if we can find some grass and water for our animals. And so they do that. Ahab says, I'll go this way, and Obadiah says, I'll go this way. And there was no rhyme or reason to how they split it up. They just split it up. But what's really cool about this is what Obadiah doesn't know is that the direction that he decided to go is going to be the exact direction in which Elijah is coming to go find Ahab. Isn't that cool? I think that is so awesome. So in verse 7 and 8, and Obadiah was on his way, and behold, Elijah met him, and Obadiah recognized him and fell on his face and said, is it you, my Lord Elijah? Isn't that awesome? And Elijah answered him, yeah, it's me. He said, go tell your Lord. In other words, go tell Ahab that Elijah is here. This was a great thing. This was so awesome. I mean, Obadiah has been sort of like secretly hiding prophets and serving the Lord and fearing the Lord, maybe sneaking away for prayer. And all the while he's living in this household, and things are obviously tense when he comes back from feeding prophets that Ahab has no idea about. And he has to like pretend he was out, I don't know, taking care of horses. And so he should be excited. And when Obadiah found Elijah, this should have been a great thing because it meant that rain was coming. Remember, Elijah told Ahab, listen, you're going to have no rain until it comes from my lips, until I say so. And so this was a great thing. There are so many reasons why Obadiah should be excited, but Obadiah is not excited. And this is why. In verse 9 through 12, Obadiah responds to Elijah's request for him to go get his king. Obadiah says, hey, have I sinned? How have I sinned against you that you would give your servant into the hand of Ahab to kill me? He goes, you want me to go tell the king that you're here? Why? Why? He's going to kill me. And this is what he means. In verse 10, he says, as the Lord your God lives, there is no nation or kingdom where my Lord has not sent to seek you out. And when they would say he is not here, he would take an oath of the kingdom or nation that they had not found you. In other words, Ahab had been going already to nations and kingdoms and saying, have you seen Elijah? Now, he's been doing this for 3 years. Have you seen Elijah the prophet? No, I haven't. You better swear an oath to me. Swear an oath to me that you haven't seen him and that he's not here. Because if I find out he's here, you're dead. So, Obadiah has he's got some reason to be nervous. He even tells in verse 12, he says, this is his fear. He says in verse 12, as soon as I have gone from you, the Spirit of the Lord will carry you, I know not where. In other words, when I go tell Ahab that you're here and we get back here, my fear is that you're not going to be here. And he says, and so when I come and tell Ahab and he cannot find you, he'll kill me. Although I, your servant, have feared the Lord from my youth. I don't deserve to die. So Obadiah, he has some legitimate reservations about this. He's like, listen, what happens if I go to King Ahab, tell him that I found you, and get back here and the Lord has told you to go somewhere else? He's going to kill me. And so after this, Obadiah sort of gives his resume. He's trying to convince Elijah, like, listen, I've already done a lot. He tells him that, he's feared the Lord since he was a kid. He's protected and fed 100 prophets from Jezebel. And he starts going down this list. And I think Obadiah, what he's trying to convince Elijah of is, I've already risked enough. I've already risked enough of my life. I don't need to do this again. I'm sure Obadiah is looking at Elijah going, haven't I done enough? Like, come on, man. I think there are a couple of things we can learn from this interaction between Obadiah and Elijah. And so I just want to pick these apart, but I really believe that there is something we can learn from both of these men and how they responded to this idea of safety, security, and provision. So I'll tell you right now, like Obadiah, this is his big debut in 1 Kings 18. Obadiah appears in the scriptures like 21 times. Eight of those times are right here in 1 Kings 18. And, 12 of those times he's being listed among names in genealogy, so it's not a big deal. This is his main debut in scripture, besides the book written by himself that's really short. I think it is the shortest book in the Old Testament. So Obadiah is sort of like a flash in the pan, but this is his big moment. And so the first thing I think we can learn from these guys is this, and I think you would agree with this, that it takes courage to step away from what is safe. It takes courage to step away from what is safe. I know what you're thinking, like, Wade, that is a no-brainer. Everybody knows that. But I didn't say that that it takes courage to stay where it's safe. I mean, that's what we want to do. But like, I know we all know it, but do any of us do it? When's the last time you took a deliberate step away from provision because you felt like God was calling you into something else? Elijah had to leave the provision of the present if he wanted to experience the provision of the future. It wasn't that God was calling him away from the widow's home just to leave him out in the desert to suffer and die. But he had to make a choice to leave that home and the provision that was there and go do what God's called him to do. And that can be risky. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, outwardly it looks pretty silly. Pretty silly. This is what baffles people. It baffles people when people say, God's called me to go be a missionary in this country. And they go, why would you want to leave why would you want to leave America? You have running water, you have a nice job, you can serve God here. Why would you leave America and go to another country where they don't even have running water? Where there's disease and famine and pain and murder and crime. And why would you want to do that? It looks very silly on the outward looking in. But here's the thing. It may look silly, but what's more important, being safe or doing what God's called you to do? Matter of fact, which one will you be held accountable for? How well you played it safe, or did you obey what God was calling you to do with your life? It baffles people when we leave steady jobs. So, steady jobs. I say steady jobs because I don't think any job is, there is tons of false security in this world. Tons of it. One economical crash and all of us could be devastated job-wise. But people sometimes, it's on the outward, it looks silly for someone to leave a stable job and income to go do what God's called them to do, where the job stability may not be there or the income may not match. Listen, I went to school, met my wife, we graduated on like a Friday, got married the next day on a Saturday. We left for a 7-day honeymoon, came back, and we started youth ministry full-time right out of school. It was perfect. We were 21 and 22. We were just starting our life. It was great. And when you know it, this is so baffling even to me at that point. But God called us away from that like 2 years later. And it was like, why? Why would God do that? And why would we want to do that? We loved the people there, still love the people there. We had a great job. Loved what we did. There was no reason from the outside to leave. There was nothing in the Northwoods for a pastor. There were no people calling me up from Hayward going, hey, we'd love to have you come up. There was no writing on the wall. But man, we would walk this cul-de-sac in Starkville, Mississippi. And we would pray all the time. Just, asking God to do a work in our lives and in the work in the ministry. And man, it just, every time we just sort of felt this tug. And finally, we had to do it. And we came up, and I went to work for a construction company, and it looked silly on the outside, but God had bigger plans. God had bigger plans. And I don't know about you, but man, I would much rather be in God's will and doing, being where God wants me to be, rather than like the safety and security of just doing what I feel like God's called me to do. Does that make sense? Like when I came up here, I didn't go into ministry. I went to banging nails and throwing hammers around. And somebody said, "Hey, what if you never go into ministry again?" I said, "It's not about that. It's about being where God told me to be. I'd rather obey him than be in ministry." So on the outside, it looks awkward and weird and silly because we're all saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Leave it alone, Wade. The last thing is this. And real quick, like, if you really want to grow in your relationship with God, there are going to be times in your life where you are going to have to trust God and step away from comforts and security and safety. And I don't mean to be fool. I'm not talking about being foolish, like being foolish. But what if God calls you into another job that pays you less? I mean, what if God calls you to a different place that's not as affluent as America? I mean, what happens? I mean, are you willing to obey and risk what others will say, and risk, finances, risk security or safety, or is it worth it more to you to, for lack of a better term, to play it safe? I don't know. Something to think about. Elijah left the provision of the widow. He left and went towards King Ahab, quite honestly, because even though that was a tough thing to do, rain was better. It was going to rain. The last thing is this, is that one of the observations I made is that Obadiah seems too comfortable with how things are. And I think we all do that. Like I said before, I think we get way too comfortable with how things are. He loved God. He's doing a great thing. He was probably really excited to see Elijah. He probably really wasn't that excited to be Ahab's household manager. But nevertheless, let's face it, Obadiah was probably not living a really harsh life because he was feeding prophets. So he knew he had food. He probably lived better than his colleagues did. And there might have been some kind of favor and respect that he got from King Ahab, which was a good thing, which probably came with some perks. And so I wonder if Obadiah maybe fell into this rhythm of living where it was like, this isn't great. It's not ideal, but it's all right. It could be worse. And I don't know if he ever considered how it could be better. He's been doing this for 3 years, so I imagine there's some kind of, he's probably slipped into some kind of rhythm, some kind of, this is just the way it's going to be, and making peace with it. But it almost sounds as if Obadiah was trying to convince Elijah that he had done enough. He goes through all this resume of what he's doing. He wants out of this. I don't think Obadiah really wants to go get Ahab because he probably doesn't want to shake up what is already going on in his life that is okay. But here's the thing. The enemy uses comfortability, false security, and mediocrity. Those are the types of shady things he uses in our life to get us away from God, to get us from stop pursuing him more. Often what the enemy won't do is he won't come with you with a super obvious thing. But he may come at you with the comforts of this life. And He may lull us to sleep with comfortability so that we wouldn't dare think of disrupting our life in order to grow closer to God or to do something different that he's calling us to do. So, I don't know if you know this, but are there places in your life where you're settling? Like, think about that for a moment. Like, are there places in our lives where we're settling and we're scared to shake that up in order to grow closer to Jesus? Just think about that. Where in your life is it so safe, financially, house-wise, I don't know, so it's so safe that you're like, gosh, I hope God never calls me out of this. What aren't you willing to give up? I don't know if you know, but Jesus did not call us to safety and security and comfort. He didn't. He called us to himself, to be his disciples. He said things like, pick up your cross and follow me. That's what he called us towards. And I say that just to say this, is that it's not that you can't live fully alive in Christ. And it's not that being a Christian and a disciple of Jesus is gloom and doom. But let's be honest. Is it super comfortable all the time? No, it's not. It's not. Is it risky? Yeah, it can be. I'll conclude with this. Peter, we know about Peter, right? So the disciple Peter, he does the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard someone doing ever. He's in a boat. This is in Matthew 14. He's in a boat. There's a storm. And all of his buddies in the boat see this figure out on the water. And they think it's a ghost. They're freaked out about this. And this figure calls out and is like, hey, it's just me, Jesus. It's okay. Don't be afraid. And Peter stands up and he picks the most trusting, the most dangerous, the most law-defying means of confirming if this is Jesus. He looks at this figure that he can't quite make out and says, well, this is in verse 28. He says, Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water. Can you imagine? I said this, can you imagine him yelling that out over the sea and all the guys in the boat just sort of look at him like, what did you just say? Are you serious? He could have picked anything else to confirm who he was. But Peter deliberately picked, if it's you, Jesus, tell me to come to you on the water. Peter was in the most safest place you could ever be when you're on the water and there's a storm. The safest place is to be in a boat, not the water. But what motivated him to get out of the boat and to risk it all was that the moment he stepped over the edge and he stood on water, he was closer to Jesus than what he was when he was in the boat. How bad do you want to experience God's provision and his power and his glory in your life? How bad do you want a relationship with God? How bad do you want to encounter his presence? I mean, we say this all the time. I just want to grow closer to God. How bad do you want to do that? And are you willing to leave the comforts and the security that you're experiencing now so that you can experience a God that can do far, far greater than anything you can hope and imagine? Are you willing to sacrifice time and treasure to see a God who has moved in the past move in your present? I hope so. I hope so, because he is desperately wanting to show you his power, his glory, his goodness, and his provision. Don't step away from that. Stay hungry. Stay thirsty over the things of God. And understand that there will be people that will look from the outside in and they will not get it. And it's okay. It's okay. But don't let that deter you from chasing after Jesus. Chase after him. Leave the safety of your boat, whatever that is, so that you can walk on water with Jesus. Leave the safety and security, or at least be willing to leave safety and security if it means following Jesus more closely. I'm not talking about being foolish. I'm not talking about doing something foolish. I'm talking about for those of us who are like, you know what? If I woke up 5 more minutes earlier, an hour earlier, I could spend an hour more with God. I could spend an hour more in prayer. I could, I've never fasted. I would love to fast. What if I fasted my lunch and built some spiritual disciplines in my life? I mean, we all want to get closer to God, but like some of us are listening, and right now, let me tell you, God may be sharing something with you. He may be tugging at your heart in a direction that, man, you can't shake it. And quite honestly, the only thing holding you back from committing to that is security and safety of what you're experiencing right now. I'm here to tell you, God is not going to leave you hanging out to dry. He's not going to do that. He's a good God. He'll take care of you. Pray. Get with some people who know God, who are smarter than you. Get with a pastor or just a mentor or somebody who knows Jesus more than you, and share these things with them and say, I feel like God is calling me into this different trusting step with him, and I'm nervous and I'm scared, but can you make sure this is what it is? Can you help me make sure that this is God and not me? And then take that step. Take that step and see what happens. There's so much goodness in store when we do that. He won't leave us. He won't forsake us. The provision that you're experiencing right now in the presence of God, in the presence of your situation, you will experience that same provision in the future if we continue to put him first, if we continue to follow hard after him, if we continue to forsake everything and cling to Jesus. He'll always provide for us. He'll always look after us. He'll never leave us. Hey, I love you. Hope you have a great day. Hope you have a great week. And remember that God's provision and his power and his glory, you could never get enough of that. Keep leaning in to who he is. Keep growing closer to God and reading the Bible, praying, worship, listening to his voice, reading the word, anything. Just continue to take next steps towards him. Amen. God bless. Hope you have a great, great week. Thank you for joining us for Element Church Online. Peace.